right. Hello.
Hey, y'all.
Welcome to another episode of the Yoked Podcast. I'm your host, Jermaine,
I'm Casey.
and thank you for joining us today. This is the Yoked Podcast where we talk about building covenant relationships through love and laughter.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you to our repeat listeners. Thank you for coming back
Yes, we
and
appreciate
listening
you.
again. Thank you to our first-time listeners. This is your first time, welcome. We do a lot of laughing, but we also do a lot of informative talking. So
Yeah.
get ready for that.
Also, if this is your first episode, I think I want to apologize in advance because this is probably going to be the heaviest episode so far. It'll get heavier, but it's just, as counselors, we know that, marriage is great, it's fun, but it's a real thing, and there's a lot of real stuff that happens in marriages. So we're going to talk about a little bit of that tonight. So before we jump into it,
We're going to do our best.
yes.
But before we jump into it, this is a kind of a general trigger warning. If you've experienced any sort of trauma in your childhood, this may be triggering for you. So just fair warning
Yeah.
before we get too far into this episode.
Yes. So, so coming up in a few weeks, we have our couples vision board party. We are down to 8 tickets left for that party. I'm so excited. We had so much fun last year.
Yes.
And the couples that are already coming have such amazing personalities. Like, I'm so excited just to spend time with them and help them plan out some things for their future. And it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So if you are interested or on the fence about that, there are 8 tickets left. The party will be February 21st. You can find it on Eventbrite under Couples Vision Board Party. You'll be able to find it there. We also have it on our Facebook pages. So if you cannot find it on Eventbrite, just head over to the Yoked Facebook page. It'll be there as well.
It is there.
Yes. So.
Just had to make sure my mic was on. Okay. Probably a little late for making sure my microphone is turned on. But
right. You probably should check that first.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It is on.
Mr. Counselor voice. You have to make sure it's on. So it's the month of February. This is the month that we celebrate, officially celebrate Black History Month. But, in the African American community, I think we try to, whether intentionally or otherwise, we're always celebrating our history and our heritage and who we are as a people. But this month, I think, is like the public worldwide opportunity for us to learn more about our culture and our history, and for people who are not African American
Right.
to learn about.
Black History Month is not really for us.
No.
It's for people who are not us.
Yes. So if this is going to be the month, and I mean, I've seen some stuff shared already, just like on social media, like things that I didn't know. And even tonight I read about a lady who actually kind of revolutionized wearing sanitary napkins for women. And she was a Black woman who was never paid for her invention. It was a belt where you kind of strapped it around, and it helped to hold the sanitary napkin up. And there was a company that wanted to buy her product and mass produce it. But when they found out she was a Black woman, they didn't want anything to do with her. And that was something I never ever heard of before. Typical. So again, this is the month for everybody to learn about African Americans. I guess it's Afro-Cuban, Afro-Latino, all of those of us who have descended from the continent of Africa in some shape, form, or fashion. And especially because we're on our ancestry journey, I think this is going to be a bigger month for us. So.
Yeah.
So all of that said, as we talk about Black History Month, we want to take this month and be intentional about talking about the history of Black people as it relates to being in a relationship. Mm-hmm. And what we kind of mean by that is that there are so many issues that are prevalent in the Black community that deals with our history and our past that we don't often fully explore. And
Right.
those things kind of, a lot of times we call them generational curses, but they kind of follow us through time if we don't deal with them.
Right. They do.
And a lot of stuff that happens in our past, sometimes it's too painful for us to talk about, so we kind of sweep it under the rug. And then, when we lash out about a certain situation, nobody knows, like, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
And it turns out that it's, more often than not from some sort of like childhood or young adult trauma that we've never fully processed or addressed. So, being the counselors, this is not going to be one of the fun, happy-go-lucky episodes that we, I think, are kind of known for and enjoy doing. But because we are here first to serve you and to help guide you through some of the, more difficult aspects of being in a marriage, this is something that we have to talk about.
Yeah, it is.
So, today's episode, sorry, is going to be
today.
Can you find the good in a trauma-induced love language? Which is probably a lot of big therapy words. So break that down for us, if you wouldn't mind, sir.
I will do my best. So, trauma-induced means there is something, some sort of behavior that has a root in a traumatic experience, usually resulting from, and when we say trauma, it means you were afraid for your life, you were afraid for your well-being, and it was, it could have been over an extended period of time, such as years. It could have been one single slice of time, meaning a few seconds.
Yeah.
And not only did you experience that on the outside, but there was a chemical response internally that you may not have been aware of. And because of that chemical response, there was some brain activity that occurred, usually in your frontal lobe. And when it's trauma, because it stays in your frontal lobe, like it's not processed to your long-term memory. So when you think about this or remember it, or something triggers that, triggers the memory in your frontal lobe, it can seem like you're experiencing it again.
Right.
That's the trauma.
Right. And I think people kind of throw the term trauma around without really knowing what it means, or understanding that anything can be trauma. Like, just because it's not trauma for me does not mean it's not trauma for another person.
Trauma is relative.
Yeah.
And it's really relative based on a lot of factors, but one of those things is resilience.
Yeah.
How resilient you are at the moment you experience the trauma.
Right. And so, like, the example I'm thinking of now, where, I play with my puppy and Orson, he'll get a little, feisty, and he kind of nips at me and bites on me, which it doesn't bother me because I know that he's not trying to hurt me. But anyone who has ever been bitten by a dog and was injured would like freak out if Orson, nipped at him or whatever.
Right.
And that's because they have a traumatic experience that they have not processed.
Right.
And, it's not to be taken lightly. Like, if it's a trauma, if you feel like it's a trauma, then it's a trauma. And even in dating relationships, I didn't figure out until like we started dating that I had like dating PTSD, because I mean, and that's the thing. Like, if you're I guess the more severe side of that is like if you've been in an abusive relationship, you could have issues with, getting close to anyone, letting them in, or, if anyone even touching you. And, well, I guess we'll just jump into it. With me, because in college, um, I'm a rape and sexual assault survivor. So even to this day, I'm very, very uncomfortable with men touching me in certain places. And it's weird because I'm a hugger. Like, I love to hug people. But if there's a man that I'm uncomfortable with that places his hand on me in a place, like, it automatically triggers me.
Hmm.
And like, you've seen that happen
Yeah.
where like I went back to that experience. And I've been to therapy for it, but it's something that I'm still processing 20 years later.
Yeah.
That, that's something that I have to keep dealing with.
Hmm.
So, but anyway, I kind of jumped right into that. Like,
Oh,
I ran past the whole love languages. I
yeah.
ran past the love languages part of it.
And if, in case you've been, away from any type of media or books, if you're unfamiliar with love languages, love languages are how we express love, and then how we experience or receive love.
Right.
So that's kind of how we got the title. You know, can you find the good in a trauma-induced love language?
Yeah. So, the different love languages, there are five of them, which they're quality time, acts of service, physical touch, words of affirmation, and receiving gifts are the five different love acts or love languages. Sorry. And so, in preparing for this episode, we really wanted to take a look at what our love languages are today and see how we experienced or did not experience our love languages as children, like really addressing like what trauma and what experiences we had in our childhood that kind of shaped us into the people we are today and helped to mold the way that we give and receive love. So I guess I'll start. Mine's is not. I think if we had to like compare, mine's is not as harsh. Like, I didn't have any ACEs. If you ever heard the term kind of thrown around, they're adverse childhood experiences.
Yeah.
So, and I think the cutoff for that is what, 18.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So any of these trauma domains that you experienced as a minor, um, they can predict mental health development in adulthood, and then how it impacts the trajectory of your life.
Yeah. And so like I didn't rank very high on the ACEs scale. I think I had like maybe 1. But all that's because all of my like severe trauma happened when I was in college. So
Yeah.
I don't fall under the ACEs category, but I still have trauma.
Right.
But so when we took the love languages test to figure out, exactly what our love languages are, because they do evolve over time.
Yep.
Mine are acts of service is my main one. And then quality time behind that is the second highest out of the 5. And looking at like why do I have those love languages now? Well, looking back at when I was in high school, I'm the oldest of 3 kids. I have 2 younger brothers. And even when I was like little, I was always responsible for taking care of my brothers. Like, if my mom, because I was the responsible kid, I was the oldest and the only girl, so I had to
Yep.
take care of them. So when my mom left or my parents were gone, I was in charge. So I was always taking care of my siblings. And especially in high school, I went to high school. I worked full time at Target. It was supposed to be part time, but they made me work full time. And I was coming home. My routine every day was to take my brothers to school, go to class, be a kid, make sure that they got home every day. Then I had to go to work. I worked until 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock if something else was going on. Came home, did my homework, was responsible for doing the dishes and all of this stuff. And this was when I was like 16 years old. So understanding or looking back and realizing that's all the stuff that I had to do when I was supposed to be a kid, like when most kids get to just go to school and come home, I was doing all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Most, not us.
Well, yeah, yeah.
I was, coming home and doing all of this stuff and being responsible. So now, you know, I know that someone loves me when they do something for me. And then even with quality time being my second, I can remember when I was like little, when I was in maybe fifth and sixth grade, I was always by myself. Like I've always been a book nerd, so I love to read, and I just, I'm perfectly happy sitting in a corner somewhere reading by myself. But I remember my brothers would go out and play with their friends. My mom may or may not be in the house. My dad was at work or doing whatever he was doing, and I was always by myself. And even though I enjoyed the quiet, I always kind of like craved companionship. And it was just me because everybody knew that I could take care of myself, so they didn't worry about me. And it was just like, yeah, you'll be fine. Just go ahead and do what you want to do. So, now it's like I need to, like I don't have to be under you 24/7, but I need to know you're there. Like I'm comfortable, and I think because that made me an introvert because I was never really expected to interact with other people, and people didn't interact with me.
Yeah.
So now, even though I want to spend time with you and be around you, I'm definitely more comfortable being by myself because that's how I've always been my entire life. And not saying that it's I don't want my husband around. That's not what I'm saying at all. But
No.
going out to like parties and being in crowds and things of that nature make me very uncomfortable because I did not grow up being around a lot of people. Even though I have a ginormous family, I did not grow
Yeah.
up being around people and having to interact with people and being expected to interact with them. So that's just like my love language has nothing to do with being in a crowd, like nothing at all, because I'm most comfortable
Yeah.
being by myself because that's how I was.
Yeah.
So,
So for me, my love languages are very. I scored very even across three love languages. So physical touch is primary, but for my secondary there's an actual tie for um, quality time and acts of service. And how I experienced these three love languages as a child was, I guess not in a way that I knew I was loved. So for physical touch, rarely was I ever touched in a loving way. So there was whenever I was most times I can remember being touched was when it was to correct me for doing something wrong or um, inflict pain or um, it was just never really enjoyable touch. I'll just put it that way. For quality time, most of the time I can remember being alone, even as a baby. While there were others in the house, I don't remember people interacting with me necessarily. Now, I'm not saying that people didn't. I'm just saying I don't remember it. As far as acts of service, I had to do a lot of things for myself or for other people. So, again, the way I experienced my top three love languages as a child was very much the opposite of love. That's not to say that the people around me didn't love me. I guess I just don't. It's not a. When I think back on my childhood, I don't know how I experienced or knew that someone loved me. sounds sadder than it actually is, but I mean, it's just the truth.
Yeah.
I can't make it any better than what it is.
Right. It's like, if you were hugged often as a child, you kind of get an inkling that, hey, maybe somebody does care about me versus, being left alone in a room and you're just like, why am I here? Nobody cares for me. Nobody is, trying to comfort me. There's a difference when you receive a positive touch versus a negative touch or no touch at all.
Yeah, and there'll be family members that say to me, "You were always around me. I always kept you." I don't remember those
Yeah.
times. I really don't. Whether as a baby, young child, don't remember those. What I do remember is people always telling me to shut up, don't stop talking,
Yeah.
stay out of grown folks' business. So that's why I don't really talk much now.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like, okay, when do I get to be myself? So I'm starting to learn that.
Yeah. And I think, you know, learning that it helps to be partnered with someone who does not stop talking ever and is always wanting you to talk
Yeah.
to them. But
Which I still probably don't do a lot.
no, most of the time it's just me asking a bajillion questions and you responding to it. But that's okay. We're going to get there.
Yeah.
But so we don't want to dwell on this a whole lot. We just wanted to really take the time to explain our stories and, first and foremost, let you know that you're not alone in this. Even, those of us who are, grown and fairly well adjusted and, trying to help others have trauma and have things that we've experienced in our own personal life. So it's not a matter of we're just telling you this is what you should do. It's like, hey, we
Yeah.
have, we've been there. So because this is such a serious topic, we really want to make sure that we're giving you the tools that you need to kind of process this information. And if you're having trouble with giving or receiving love, to be able to take the steps to identify why that might be and figure out how to grow through that. So the first thing is to understand that your family of origin is part of your love language.
Definitely.
And can you explain that a little bit? You can explain it much better than I can. Like, I understand what it means, but
I hope so.
yeah.
And so, what we mean by family of origin is, the family with which you grew up and the culture of that family growing up. So, if you came from a family that always says "I love you," you're gonna grow up to be an adult who always says "I love you." If you grew up in a family where you did not hear those words "I love you," nor no one said them, you didn't hear them, it's going to feel very awkward when you say them as an adult.
Right. And I think either situation could cause you to have your primary love language be words of affirmation, because you either grew up with it and this is what you're used to, or you grew up without it and never had it and you're craving it now to understand that or know that, you are loved and positively affirmed.
Yep. And so if you grew up in a family that's full of huggers and kissers, like when you see each other, you hug and kiss each other on the cheek. And then when you get older, you're going to be a hugger and a kisser on the cheeker. Is that a kisser on the cheeker?
I'm not a kisser on the cheeker, but I'm definitely a hugger. Definitely a hugger.
And if you did not grow up with that, well, when someone does it to you as an adult, you feel uncomfortable. You're like, what is...
Right. Get your body off of me.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
go over
Because
there.
it's like, it's kind of violating your personal space. It's like, who is this stranger or person that I'm not comfortable with all in my personal space? And so, for example, personally, growing up, I didn't hear the words "I love you" very much. Actually, I rarely heard them. And so, even with my parents now, growing up, I didn't hear it. So now, when we say it to each other, it's awkward.
Mm-hmm.
It still feels a little uncomfortable. I'm getting used to it more
Mm-hmm.
because we're actually like making a point to say it to each other. But even now, it still feels a little awkward. It comes out a little weird, but it comes out now. Whereas when I was a kid, it didn't. It didn't come out. We didn't say it, um, and yeah. So for me to say it to my parents feels awkward, but we say it now.
Yeah.
For me to say it to my wife, very natural. I can't necessarily explain why that is. Don't have all the answers, but that's how that works.
Yeah. Um. So understand that um, as long as you have memories and trauma that are seated in your frontal lobe, your past will have a tendency to haunt you because you have not processed these things and moved them to the back of your brain into your long-term memories. So things might trigger you a little more easily
Mm-hmm.
because you can't really separate, okay, this is what happened in the past, it's not exactly what's happening right now, like I'm not in this moment, but you'll still have those triggers until you are able to process the experience and move it to your long-term memory where it needs to be. And understand that, generational curses are real and they can
Mm-hmm.
manifest in different ways. And like you just explained, like if you grew up not, being hugged and kissed and told that I love you, then when you have a child, that's going to be the pattern that you emulate because you didn't receive love in that way. You more than likely, I'm not going to say you won't, but you more than likely will give love or
Mm-hmm.
withhold love in
Yeah.
the same way
Yep.
so that your parent and you and your child and your child's child will, understand that, okay, we don't express love by hugging and touching and kissing because that's not what we do. And that's a manifestation of a generational curse unless you take, intentional effort to say, okay, it's okay for me to express love through a safe touch or a kiss or greeting each other in this certain way. That's going to be something that continues in your family.
Mm-hmm.
So if this is something where, you're trying to figure out for yourself, did you experience some sort of childhood trauma and how that affects your love language today? What advice would you give for people to kind of work this out?
Hmm. That's a tough one. Repeat the question, please.
So if someone is trying to work out if what childhood traumas that they had and how it kind of manifests in their love language today, like how can they work through this process, like what advice would you give them to say, okay, this is what I need to do to figure out how my childhood was, how does my childhood affect who I am today and how I give and receive love?
Man, that's a tough question. Um, and that's something that I'm still working through. Um, Part of what you will want to do. Okay, so I would recommend this. Go see a counselor
Yeah.
and help allow the counselor to actually help you process that trauma, whatever that is, um, and understand how to properly put the trauma in context. Um, I think part of it is recognizing that recognizing your triggers. Um, and I think early on I had to really understand and be open with myself so I could be open with my wife about what certain triggers were. For me, I didn't know them all. I, I, I can't say I do know them all.
Yeah.
But I think as I recognize what a trigger is for me, I'm open enough to share with my wife what those triggers are and help her to understand that while I don't understand or completely know why this trigger is a trigger for me, but so this is what it is,
Yeah.
and I'm going to kind of investigate why that is, to be able to understand. I'm still like I'm just now learning, like over the last few weeks I'm just now learning that when people in authoritative positions ask me questions that I don't know the answer to, I respond out of my trauma. I respond by shutting down.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that until a few weeks ago. Literally, a few weeks ago. Just realized that.
Yeah.
So when I'm kind of put on the spot, and that's coming from when I was a child, people expected me to respond as though I was an adult and knew all the answers. And if I didn't know the answers, I was shamed and, I got in trouble. We'll put it like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's another part of our history is the getting in trouble.
Yeah.
Yes. So, um, so I think if you can remember your childhood, and I'm just talking to our audience, if you can remember your childhood, try to look and see what was your love language as a child. And we didn't really have this terminology when we were kids. Most people
Yeah,
didn't.
we didn't.
Our millennials get to have it, but
Yeah.
we didn't have it. And so if you're wondering, how do I figure out what my love language was as a child? What was it that your parents or someone you knew loved you? What did they do or what did they say? So, if the way that you knew your mom loved you was every Saturday afternoon she baked cookies with you and talked to you about, how your week went, then and that's how you knew she loved you. She showed you love through quality time and acts of service. And if, your fondest childhood memories were fishing with your dad, like I have a memory of fishing with my dad. The fishing pole ended up in the water. That's a different story.
Yeah.
If your fondest memories were fishing with your dad, then maybe quality time was your love language because that's how you knew your dad loved you. That's how you can kind of identify what your love languages were as a child and figure out if those are the same love languages you have as an adult. And conversely, if your worst memories from childhood were being left alone and now you don't want to be left alone, it could be because your quality time love language today was influenced by the trauma of being left alone as a child. So there's a reason why and a reason behind who we are as people, and understanding who we are today is the best way for our spouses to understand who we are and why we are, for them to be able to love us.
Right.
Because if I'm just, super clingy and always under you and have to go everywhere with you, and you don't know why I won't get off of you because I never told you that as a child, people abandoned me all the time. So now my love language is quality time, and I really need to be with you in order to feel loved.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a reason why we are the way we are.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. Did we make it?
I think so. I don't know. This was not an easy topic
No.
at all. It was really
No.
not an easy topic, but very much felt like we needed to address this because of a lot of things that, people are dealing with and people close to us are dealing with, and questions that people have, and trying to understand who we are as individuals and where we're trying to go in our life.
Yeah. And as much as I want to, I guess, place blame for trauma, the way to healing is not through blaming
Right.
or finding fault. It's the path to healing is through um, awareness,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledgement, acceptance of um, acceptance of reality, and um, a search for connection, deeper connection with Christ. I don't think that simply avoiding it or sweeping it under the rug or dismissing it is healthy for anybody.
Yeah.
And as soon as you recognize that you have a trigger, you need to follow it and really make the decision to understand. Try to understand why. Where is this coming from? And the worst thing you can do is try to hold someone else responsible, especially your partner, the person who loves you and who wants to see you healed and thrive and wants nothing but the best for you. You it's um, unfair to hold them responsible for understanding how to approach your trauma when you don't understand it.
Yeah.
Uh, so you owe it to yourself to really. I think own is the incorrect word, but address.
You deserve to address.
Yeah,
Your heart deserves to address the things that have hurt you and have hindered you.
yeah. Ignoring them will only make it worse.
Yeah.
And if you're with someone, if you're the partner of someone who has experienced trauma, the best thing you can do is have patience with them. Just because someone recognizes or points out trauma does not mean that I as the person who experienced the trauma even know how to address it or I'm ready to address it. You have to experience you have to give patience. You have to give grace and mercy. And you have to be willing to, if you're not willing to walk with them through that healing process, don't get in the way. Get out of their way and let them process it the way they need to process it.
And I think that's a very important thing to share. Like, we have to stop shaming each other for acknowledging that we need help and
Yeah.
wanting to seek help, and seeking professional help.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with having a therapist, and we're not saying that because we're counselors. It's people are trained to help you process trauma to live the healthiest and best life that you can, and it is unfair. It is dishonoring to shame someone for wanting to seek that help and actually seeking it out.
Yeah. So I won't say anymore.
So again, we really hope and pray that this episode has helped someone who needed to hear it, and has encouraged the person who is ready to move forward in their lives and move forward into health and healing. Because I think a lot of times, sometimes we just need permission to
Yeah.
be able to move forward and to get the help and healing that we actually need. So I just pray that that this has done that. And never done this before, but I feel like I want to pray over the people who are listening to this episode, because this is not something that just, we're just going to talk about it and just like, all right, have a nice night, see you later. So if it's okay, I want to just say a quick prayer over everyone that's listening. Lord, I thank you for this opportunity that we've had to speak to our audience and to reach those who would need to hear this word of encouragement from us tonight. Lord, I pray that you grant peace over those who are under the sound of our voices, who need peace, who need permission to grow and to heal and to love and to move forward in their lives. Lord, I just pray that you would give those who need it, who are seeking it, give them the courage to find hope and grace and restoration in you. And Lord, I pray that you give them the fortitude to keep moving forward. Lord, I pray that you help them to understand and be reminded that they are loved and desired and valued in this world, Lord, that they have a purpose and that their purpose is ultimately to be found in you, Lord. I just pray that you continue to bless them and watch over them and keep them healthy and whole despite the trauma that they've endured, despite the past hurts, despite all of the things that would seek to hurt them and to hinder them and to keep them from your loving embrace, Lord. I just pray over their lives. I pray over their minds and their hearts and every facet of their being, Lord. These things I ask in your Son's holy and most precious name, I pray. Amen.
Amen.
So, thank you.
Thank you
for listening to us tonight. I know this was hard. Thank you for being here with us. Make sure that you subscribe, like, share this with a friend. Make sure that you rate the podcast, because we like to know when we're doing things right, and if we're doing wrong, please let us know. We'll do better.
And leave comments. We like comments.
Yes, so make sure you like us on our Facebook page. You can follow us on our YouTube channel, and we can keep the conversation going. So until next time, bye.
Bye.
Love.